reason I wanted to mention that is that I have about 100 students a year, almost all grad students, and 50% of their grade is a term project saying, pick your favorite city to move to. Assume that you've got a paid job there, but pick any city in the world where you want to move to. Find a distressed piece of real estate to buy as a place to live. Condo, house, fixer-upper, the more up value, the better. And you have to get owner-occupied financing, 90-95% high leverage owner-occupied financing, live in it for a year, turn around and rent it, understand the rental market, hold it for 3 years as an investment, and then sell it. And it's a great way for them to understand that circle of risk box that you've got there, those 13 circles of risk. 3 years ago, in the years before that, the favorite cities were always Chicago, New York, Boston, San Francisco, Seattle, Austin, maybe somewhere overseas. 3 years ago, the first person said, I want to move to Detroit. 2 years ago, 5 people out of my 100 students said, I want to move to Detroit. You know how many students this year said they want to move to Detroit for this career, full-time? 25. So this is my scientific analysis of where is quality of life. And what does this? Oh, I get it.
Okay. So these students are putting their hard-earned degree with tens, perhaps 100,000 plus in student debt to pick a place where they say, I can make a difference, I can have fun, and I can make money. And it, I think, is proof positive that Detroit is way beyond the bankruptcy headlines. I'm glad I followed Symposium. The best term project, after the students do their individual term project, they go in teams with a landscape architect and an urban planner, a law student, an MBA perhaps, 4 skills, and they go do a mixed-use development. Again, they pick any city in the country. And the majority of those are now in Detroit. And the best project last semester was headed by a boat person from Vietnam, short, bright kid who's getting a joint MBA and JD degree. He did the best project. He found it through Symposium. It was right on Woodward, a 2-story, 4,500 square foot of residential, over 4,500 square foot of retail. It was so good, he said, I want to go do it. This guy went to the Naval Academy before he came to Michigan. And Symposium said, well, I'll help you buy it. You got to get Peter Allen to put his money where his mouth is and be a partner, because I've never done any development outside of Ann Arbor. So I am going with both feet with Don and his team, an architect and urban planner, and Don Dong, and we're buying this building. And it's a lesson in the economics of Detroit. We're buying the building for $10 a foot. Basically, we're buying the land because the building is more expensive to fix up than new construction. And those rents barely make sense, and we need some subsidies. I'll use that as an example as I go through this box that you've got. So I want to give you, whether you're doing Michigan, whether you're doing New Orleans, any country, any city, real estate development, as I teach it and as I practice it in my own development, is mitigating each one of these 13 buckets of risk. Any one of those buckets can kill your deal. If you don't quantify it, if you don't stack it with an expert, if you don't mitigate it well, you're going to severely diminish your returns. And the returns that we're looking for are not based on tax and depreciation advantages. They're not based on obscene profits. They're based on a good, solid deal is an 8 to 10% dividend. You put up $100,000 of equity over the debt, you want to get an 8 to 10% yield on that $100,000 once it stabilizes. 2 or 3 times normal CD rates. Normal CD rates today are 1%, but they used to be 3 to 4. So you want to get something that's a premium for the illiquidity of real estate, and that is that 8 to 10% per year. You want to double it with appreciation. And the way it appreciates is because economic cycles, inflation, but that's not to be counted on as much as you create value. You go and build and develop places that people want, in neighborhoods that they want to be, and that it's mixed use, transit-oriented, character, authentic real estate development, historic rehab wherever possible. Any building over 50 years, you got to try to save it. Commodity, greenfield real estate, as you've heard many, many times today, is a thing of the past. That is not the passive growth. That's not what these students want. That's not what the other bookend generation, the empty nester, the 55 and older crowd want. Everybody wants to be downtown, walkable to, as Fred Kent says from pps.org, within the power of 10 community. 10 great reasons to be there. So let's quickly go through the boxes, but I want to highlight just 3 or 4. So we are at a favorable economic cycle. We're at a point where the economy looks like it should improve. Interest rates are favorable. We've suffered through a horrible recession, but we could have a 3 to 5 year economic cycle that's favorable to do our development, get it occupied and stabilized, and maybe even refinanced before the next downturn. This assumes we don't have some sort of extraordinary upset on the world scene. So without that debate, at least domestically, it looks like we've got a pretty favorable environment for you to lock up a deal, for you to start doing something. Bob, slide over to environmental. Environmental needs to be brownfield development. Certainly that's more of an advantage, but we've got a whole new set of environmental issues that we've never really quantified. We don't know where it's going. When you see what Hurricane Sandy did, when you see what Hurricane Katrina did, when you understand global warming and crazy seasons and weather and floods and droughts, you don't know where real estate values are headed. You can't really mitigate that like you used to. So that's a flashing yellow box that I'm not sure where it's headed. But to buy something out of a floodplain near transit, in fact, let me emphasize, the overriding principle among all these boxes today is to get rid of the car. To be less dependent on an auto. To be more dependent on transit. To be more dependent on multimodal. Biking, walking, jogging, to work, to exercise, to whatever. But we cannot be dependent on the car. That car at $10,000 a year of all the costs just kills the economics. Building parking decks is crazy. Let's go to the next one, because this is a really important box. What I know and feel is what I learned from my best and brightest students. And that is that they don't want commodity real estate. They don't want greenfield. They don't want a typical stick-built stuff. They want authenticity, they want character, they want brick walls, they want hardwood floors, they want big windows, they want walkable, they want transit-oriented, they want a place to park their bike, they want multi-generational, they want to spend their money on their iPhone or their iPad or their technology instead of their car. They're very experiential. I mean, really, really feel strongly that this experience of what I do and how I spend the 3 years after college, I have no interest in taking my car and commuting for 30, 40, 50 minutes. This pre-lease, pre-sell requirement, one of my students is doing some condos in Ann Arbor next to Carytown in the farmer's market. He is on his 3rd phase of development. He's just finished in 14, about to break ground on 21 more condos. These are 4-story, stick-built, over parking, $25,000 a space for parking, with people who probably after a time won't use their car that much because everything is so walkable and it's right near the train station, but the zoning requires it. But the surprising thing is that these are empty nesters and young professionals paying $400 per square foot to buy their condo right now with no advertising. He doesn't even have time to put a sign on the property. And it's a testament to the comments you heard this morning that there is a huge imbalance for this walkable urbanity opportunity relative to supply. These people, if they're 55 and older, are selling their house, or trying to, or giving it to their kids to raise their kids and their grandkids. but they clearly are paying a premium of $400 per square foot. To buy that condo, they're 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, so we're $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. And they're buying it sight unseen, putting 20% down before it breaks ground. I mean, this is all because of the location and the amenities. If we rented it, we almost did that with one of these projects, but we decided the condo market had returned with such a vengeance, so we decided to go ahead and sell. We could rent it for about $250 a square foot per month. So that's about $30 per square foot per year. So the rental works as well as the for sale. And by the way, this sheet that you've got is based on a rental development. If you do a for sale, all the boxes are the same. It's just the box in the middle. Instead of getting a 8 to 10% cash flow and a double of that with appreciation, you want to get that all right up front. So you want to get a 20% margin. And doing a housing development for sale, a good product, these condos being built in downtown Ann Arbor are a 30% margin. Stick built over concrete. I mean, it's unbelievable how strong that market is. And we don't know how deep it is. So a town that's got character has got that hidden demand that in spite of how bad the condo market was from 2007 to 2012, it may be coming back more than you think. One of the challenges for the people to sell the house they've got and to move that equity into this new house downtown. Transit-oriented development. I think, Bob, it was you who talked about the increase in rents and the increase in sales value, depending on the number of blocks you are from the station. In Southeast Michigan, we have several major transit systems that are all coming together. A higher speed rail by rebuilding the tracks from Chicago to Detroit. Hopefully someday it's going to go across the river into Toronto and maybe right up to St. Lawrence. We've got a commuter that's got the cars and the engines and using the same MDOT-owned tracks. We just bought them from Norfolk Southern. So a commuter that would go from Ann Arbor to Depot Town and Ipsy to Merriman Road for the airport and to Greenfield Village and then right up to Woodward, right at the M1 stop at the Amtrak station. So with these various transit systems, it is really the path of growth in driving the development within a quarter of an eighth of a mile of those transit stations. We saw lots of pictures about mixed-use development. And the more those are closer to that transit, the less dependency of the car. If the zoning goes along with it, and the city master plan and guidelines go along with it, you can avoid the car, and that saves $25,000 per car at least. Okay, Bob, let's go over to, how many architects do I have in the room? Liz, great, wonderful. Folks, love your architect. And I mean that. The architect can double the profit margin. Double the profit margin. Anything that's built in the future has got to be wow architecture. It's got to have an emotional response that people say, I've got to have it. Just think of the premium you pay for a Porsche or Audi or an iPhone or an iPad. And this younger generation clearly appreciates character space. Whether you're working there, whether you're living there, whether it's third place and you do your coffee bar or restaurant. I'll give you a quick couple of facts. As part of our analysis of Detroit, we met with the city of Detroit about this one purchase. And the guy that heads the real estate program, he was here this morning, I don't see him this afternoon, says, the city of Detroit, now have 15,000 properties that I got back from tax foreclosure, that nobody bought at tax foreclosure, that I'm now moving onto the land bank that I want to sell. You've all heard that there's 75,000 properties in Detroit that are vacant. We were running some numbers in class. One person needing, let's say, 600 square feet as an apartment. Tell me if this is right, Levi. 600 square feet for one bedroom apartment, and $100 a foot is $60,000. So that one person moving into Detroit or moving out represents about $60,000 worth of apartment space, residential space. Where they Where they work is another 200 square feet. Maybe let's say just 100 square feet, more of an IT kind of an operation with lots of people, with one person per 100 square feet. So that's another $10,000 worth of space. Where they do all their third place experience, where they party, where they restaurant, where they go to the bar, where they shop, that's another 100 to 300 square feet of space per person. That's another $20,000, $30,000. So one person living in Detroit represents about $100,000 worth of real estate. So if you take 1 million people that have moved out of Detroit at $100,000 per person, how many billion is that? I think I asked a student, there's $100 billion worth of disinvestment in Detroit over the last several decades. If we get 100,000 people to move back to Detroit, that's $10 billion worth of bricks and mortar. And we're talking some pretty serious numbers here. So if I were your age, I'd be living in Detroit. How many of you guys live in Detroit? Anybody? Any of you guys? Good. I mean, I can't believe the jobs in construction, the jobs in leasing, the jobs in property management, the jobs in financing. I mean, Detroit is going to be one of the best job markets in the country with what's going on. Okay, I think I've covered, I'll do that below. Construction. To build space today, whether it's character, historic, you're trying to bring back the brick walls, you're trying to bring back the hardwood floors, you're trying to bring out the high ceilings, it's more expensive than new construction. Typical stick built. So we're $150 a square foot easy for hard costs to build that space. Plus we have to have our soft costs, our marketing, our finance, our legal, assuming that the $150 a square foot includes the architects and the engineers. To find a contractor, one of my students had bought a house in Detroit, a 5-unit brick. He salvaged about 20% of the building. It's over on, it's right up near Midtown. I can't remember the street, Forest, I think. And he salvaged 20% just so he could trigger the tax credits. He was still spending $150 a square foot for that space. The biggest surprise he's had so far is that the building permits for this one house, 4,500 square feet, were costing him $10,000. Hopefully that will improve. But finding good contractors, he had to train his own carpenters. He couldn't find anybody. So as Sue Mosey, as she had more time to talk to you, I'm sure one of the kinks in their pipeline is finding trades, finding qualified trades, maybe teaching them how to do it. But if you're going to salvage every one of those buildings that's over 50 years old, it requires some very, very skilled people. In the developments that I've done, my most successful ones, I've always partnered with a contractor. So they've got a piece of the action. Bob, let's slide down to box 6. These two boxes, boxes 6 and 7, are the riskiest boxes. Why is that? This box, social and community goals, and the next one, political approvals. Why is that the riskiest box? Any government officials in the room? Totally unpredictable. Thank you. You can predict, you can quantify, you can nail down and mitigate every one of these other risks, but you can't guess how the NIMBYs and the Planning Commission and the City Council might vote on some of your deals. Particularly if you're out-of-towner, particularly if you're greenfield, particularly if you're not carefully responding to the fabric and the values of the community. I would be hesitant to get involved in the redevelopment of a community that didn't have a clear master plan. As a developer for 40 years, I don't like to have people look down on me as somebody to rape the local community. I like to know that I'm implementing a community plan, that they've got a well thought through plan, they've created a master plan, and they've created form-based code. One of the best things that CNU ever did was to push this form-based code and to get rid of the old Euclidean zoning so that we can get back to an emphasis on setback, design, and not be so worried about use. So a city that's adopted form-based code and good FARs, floor area ratios with premiums, that's the kind of city you want to work with. Detroit as a city is not quite there. But with people like Sue working the process, unfortunately it's beginning to come together. So this understanding what the community wants to become is not the role of the developer. One of the reasons we had so much suburban sprawl was because you went out to where it was easy, cheap, and the city didn't seem to mind, and the farmers were desperate to sell you their farm because that was their retirement nest egg and their kids didn't want to farm. Fortunately, that trend, that curve is turned. Now we've got these wonderful trends of farm to table, know your farmer, know your pig, know your chicken. The local farmers are working with the local grocery stores and certainly the restaurants so that the food shed is a community value. It's now pretty easy to find the bike score, the walk score, the transit score of any property you're looking at. And there's a clear relationship between those and the value. Maybe not for what you pay for it, but what you're going to get in rents or sales prices. Okay, Bob, let's move down to 7. So I've covered that a little bit already. That can, to get those entitlements can take 6 to 12 months. Ann Arbor, as part of its rezoning, has now got a design review committee, so professionals in town. So at the very early stage of any kind of new development, you go sit down with a jury of architects, urban planners, contractors, and show them your rough ideas and get their take before you spend a lot of money and upset the neighbors. And it's working very, very well. It's part of the rezoning. Okay, let's move to 8. I'm in the middle of refinancing all my properties in Ann Arbor. I've got 5 buildings on North Main overlooking the river. There were factory buildings I've converted to residential and software. I've got $1 million rent roll. I got a $600,000 NOI. I'm having no trouble refinancing that property at 5%, 30 years, non-recourse, 75% loan to value with CMBS. I can't believe these collateralized mortgage-backed securities are so alive and well and competitive in offering better deals that you can find from life companies or banks. So financing, in fact, the 2 lenders, one was Citicorp out of New York and one was Guggenheim out of Chicago, both said they are now lending all over the state of Michigan. That was a surprise. That's a real switch. Now, I'm not sure that means downtown Detroit yet, but it's coming. There's a lot of herd mentality among bankers, and I think what they read about the municipal bond market and bondholders taking a haircut in Detroit and what's happening with the bankruptcy, that kind of uncertainty scares the bejesus out of them. So I think it will get to Detroit as well. Cap rate trends, those of you who are financing income streams, I've seen cap rates in Detroit in the last 5 years go from 16% to 10%. So if you've got a $10,000 net operating income, if you divide that by 16%, you got an $80,000 value. You divide it by 10%, you got a $100,000 value. So the same piece of real estate has increased in value by 20% just because of the attitude about Detroit as being a little safer, a little better investment climate. So cap rates are a measure of risk. The lower the cap rates, the lower risk. Detroit is now beginning to stabilize down in the 10%, in some cases even down to the 8% level. Ann Arbor is in the 5% for multifamily, 6% for student rentals, 8% for office and retail. So the debt markets are coming back in a very favorable way. I've heard a new term. How many of you are developers? Raise your hand. So not many. you developers have got to know return on cost, which means the NOI divided by, if you're doing a rental property, the NOI divided by 100% of the cost is somewhere around 8%. 8 to 10%. You want to know more, just contact me. All right, Bob, let's go over to, not much there. A big surprise is, couldn't we have tax reform? I'd like to see it. Hasn't been done since '86. You might have some change in the depreciation schedules, but basically you do real estate not for tax reasons, you do it for good cash flow reasons, that it generates a 10% cash on cash. Okay, let's move over to one of the best ways to take the risk out of real estate is to pre-lease or pre-sell. If you really have got a strong location, and you can find a rental tenant, or you can find a buyer who wants to sign an agreement in advance and you break ground, you take all the risk out of the deal. And you can do that where there's predictability and quality of life. And a place where people want to live, whether it's an empty nester on an ownership basis, whether it's a young around the eds and meds, around software development, around college towns, Grand Rapids, Ann Arbor, neighborhoods of Detroit, certainly Kalamazoo, to get around good job growth and good quality of life and good R&D and good lifelong learning kinds of experiences are all good places to imagine a little more dense development. Particularly, I tell my students, particularly for that assignment of find the property that you want to buy as a condo or house, pick the worst property in the best neighborhood. And find a neighborhood that's got quality of life, that's got maybe good transit connections, and find just a drive-by windshield tour of what's a rundown looking house. Where is there somebody not taking care of the property? That's the best set of filters to go through to start with. Okay, Bob, I think what I want to do last, do I go 10 minutes? Can you pull up on this? Put that in. And there's a...
While Peter's doing that, I forgot to mention that we are giving credits for the AICP. We were awarded 4 credits for this. So if you're a community planner, if you're an APA member or an AICP member, talk to Dave before you go. And we'll take down your name and such, and we can give you the 4 credits we have. Tried to give them credits already, but some people want.
I want to show you, okay, go to that last one right there, trend up 318. So this is an ideal new construction project. This is about 15,000 square feet. This is now a car wash on West Liberty in downtown Ann Arbor. This is a design by Mark Reuter that I think has got great relevance for infill mixed-use development that's inexpensive to build. It's got parking underneath. There's a little bit of grade change so you can drive around back and park underneath if you need on-site parking. This is about 7,000 square feet per floor times 4 floors, so you got 28,000 square feet. The first floor is retail. Folks, if you're trying to turn around a neighborhood, what are the 3 most important types of retail that you need to turn around a neighborhood? Pardon me? What's the first thing you'd want to see in a neighborhood that's a sign of life that it's coming alive?
Beer.
Bar, beer. Okay, so bar. How many square feet do you need for a bar? A startup bar? 3,000? 1,000 to 1,500. You can get started with 1,000 to 1,500. 20 feet wide, standard storefront, 100 feet deep. There's those kinds of bars all over the world. Okay, that's 2,000 square feet right there. What's the next most important thing you want? Pardon me?
Breakfast restaurant.
A restaurant that serves, ideally, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It starts at 7 o'clock in the morning and it goes till midnight. It complements the bar. And how many square feet do you need for a restaurant? Another 2,000 square feet. Now, what's the third most important thing to have? Think Portland or Seattle. Coffee. And how many square feet do you need for a coffee house?
800.
Yeah, 1,000? So we've talked about 5,000 square feet with those three uses, and you got guaranteed placemaking. Right, Dan? That's placemaking. Those three uses. And the key is to find local operators. You don't want Starbucks. You don't need a razzle-dazzle credit tenant for these. And they want the character space. In fact, they may be partners with you. So we were going to put 3,000 square feet like that in the front, and the back we were going to put a couple of residential units with a little fence and garden. So that first floor could be retail or residential. The second floor of 7,000 square feet was going to be office. The third and fourth floor were going to be residential flats. 800 to 1,000 square feet with a balcony, and the top units were going to have a little balcony up on the top. And it was going to be shaped or pointed to the sun, to the south, so you could put solar on there. This was $120 a square foot to build. This could sell today for $300 a square foot, plus your land costs. The land was going to be $700,000. Somebody just bought this. I was focused on the Carytown area to do another condo, so somebody else has bought this and they're doing condos. They're not doing retail, they're just doing straight condos. I think that's unfortunate. So this is the kind of little infill. This is 7,000 square feet on 14,000 square, on a half an acre, less, quarter of an acre. And you can solve the parking underneath it if you have to. And you can rent them instead of sell them. So think about this, the staircase and elevator in front. I like a glass box that really highlights the staircase instead of the brick. I would not do a brick staircase like that. Very bikeable. One car of parking per apartment space. Okay, I think I'm going to just take any questions. I think I've covered the key points that I want to make. So what can I do to help you? Please.
Are there any cities or mayors who are pushing the bubble on the parking requirements?
I'm glad you asked that.
Multiple family or?
And if they aren't, they ought to be replaced. We are working with MEDC, and MEDC hired me and my best students. We've done 10 cities in Michigan. Allegan, Ferndale, Ypsilanti, Roseville, Muskegon, and the cities identified as part of the Redevelopment Ready program a site in their downtown. And the places, then they bring us in to do the feasibility analysis to get it ready for developer, to try to bridge between who owns it now and some developer wants to develop it. Those cities where we have to solve an old parking requirement by old zoning, they don't work. We can't make them work. Where they've been enlightened and they provide public parking, or they've reduced it, as Sue said, to one parking space per apartment, you can make the numbers barely work depending on the critical mass of that downtown.
Have you seen any suggestions where you restrict, or the people that invest or rent agree to some restrictions on their driving as a requirement for getting?
I have not seen that where the buyers or renters volunteer to reduce their parking.
Because, you know, if Chris Lamberger and Jeff back in Richmond, Florida are right, particularly close to university campuses, you'd think that there would be an interest in a car sharing thing, but you'd have to have some restrictions.
To have a little zip car where they share the car. If you're in the heart of downtown, and this is true in Ann Arbor, neighborhoods of Detroit, neighborhoods of Grand Rapids, where you can walk to jobs, grocery, critical needs, bar scene, you can make a great case that the parking ought to be severely diminished. And particularly if you want affordable units, you can build them without any car arrangement at all. We had 6 apartments, small apartments that were 400 square foot for people making 68% of the adjusted median income. They didn't get a parking spot.
Peter, I want to add a comment about that, about parking. The parking should not have to be on site. If you require 1 stall per unit or whatever, it should be allowed to be off-site somewhere else. We tried to do that in the Birmingham form-based code 20 years ago. Delani said, let's have parking flexibility so that we can park in a city garage. At the time, the city wasn't even plowing the top of the garages because they were so underutilized. Now there's a shortage. So the city attorney said, yes, we can give you a 30-year lease in a city garage. So we put that in the code, but at the last minute, the planning commission or the city commission pulled that out, and they required on-site parking for all new residential. The unintended consequence of that was that it required parking to be underground at about $35,000 per space, which meant that all of the new condos built under the new 5-story zoning ended up being $3 to $4 million condos. And there isn't a demand for that many $3 to $4 million condos, even in Birmingham. You can still buy a nice mansion out by Cranbrook for $3 to $4 million. So there was a period of time where we had several dozen condos that were vacant. In fact, the condos right here next to my office building on the park still have a vacant floor. They've been built for 10 years because of that one tweak of the code where they required the on-site parking.
Can I also add something? I know we all believe that we're unique. I know every state and municipality in the country thinks it's unique, but the fact is that a lot of this ground has been covered and very effectively in other places. In Southern California, we built what we're discussing today in the 80s, and we have 30 years experience in managing districts with limited parking. You need to study those because they're in full operation, have an awful lot to teach you and to guide you on. For example, the parking requirements for retail in districts, in mixed commercial districts like Ann Arbor, in the 2 to 3 million square foot of commercial development territory, are around 2 per thousand, which is a remarkable number considering that the store equivalent number is currently close to 5. So we're operating at half of the parking, which is absolutely remarkable. In Pasadena, Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and so on. The other thing that is remarkable is that all parking garages at this point are wired. And there is pricing that is attached to the managing of these garages. If you're asking the places by between 7 and 11 in the morning, parking is free. If you're out there between 11 and 1, you have to pay $2 or $3 an hour. If you, or $2 or $3 flat. If you go to on Friday night, you have to pay between $7 and $12. So parking is related to the volume of people that are using it, not to a flat requirement. And lastly, housing and cars are disconnected from each other, or can be disconnected from each other, the best of examples, and are being presented to the market as separate. So you can buy a unit without getting a car in these places, or you can buy cars without, car parking without buying a unit. So it is really essential that we don't start here looking at ways of organizing subjects when places in our country who have deep experience about how these things are managed.
Great. Bob's going to take a couple more questions. Who else? Please.
You described one benchmark of development success as second income. Could you describe that, please?
Owner-occupied office, where the principal says, I want to buy this, I want to bring my employees there, I'm not in it for the return on investment, I'm in it for the emotional response and the productivity. My employees want to come early, leave late, come weekends, and they buy a factory and fix it up, and they may subsidize the rent. That's one example. I think some people will say, I love this building, I want to do something for the community, I want to bring it back to life, and it doesn't pencil out, and that's okay. Great question. Yes, sir.
Do you feel that the younger generation that wants to be back in the city, that desire will last beyond their childless years?
Did y'all hear that? So everybody thinks that after they get married and they're going to have kids, they'll move back to their hometown. That used to be true. From what I see from my students, and I've got 33 years of teaching them, and I'm in very close contact with about 10%, I don't see them moving back out to the suburbs as much as trying to change the schools in the inner city.
That's what it is. That's going to be the retention rate is what do the public schools
solve the crime element, then it's heavily reliant
Gotta
on
solve the crime. Yep.
and heavily reliant on places for kids to do things in the city.
Any of you know the co-housing principle? 40 units around a common house, big in Europe, started in Denmark. There are 3 of them in Ann Arbor. It is a natural for Detroit. How many of you are residential developers? To do 40 units that are condo, that are all clustered around the center, and they've got a common house with 2,000 or 3,000 square feet in the center, where you've got all the common activities and occasional common dining. But everything is inward facing, all the cars are subordinated to the outside edge, the kids can run around all day long and feel perfectly safe about it. There are 85 co-housing developments in America now, but I see it's a great solution for an immediate neighborhood in Detroit. Another question? Anything else?
Peter.
Yes, sir.
No. Like Peter, I have lots of students who have been to and more living in Detroit, and I ask the same question. Are they leaving their kids to come school? I think in many cases they will stay and reform the schools. But guess what? It's actually more dangerous. It's more dangerous on average to live in the suburbs than the inner city, including crime. Far more people die of real accidents than stranger homes, especially children. So the whole generation that took their kids to better schools, better education, but they actually exposed their kids to greater. On average, it's more dangerous to live in Birmingham than Detroit. On average.
Kit, would you like to add anything? Kit's also on the faculty. Anyone counterpoint, anything you want to add from your student perspective?
No, they've got it.
Okay. Kit also teaches urban design. Any last question? Thanks, everybody. A lot of fun.